So now we're gonna get to the mentality behind this bullshit. So okay, at every turn of the American Republic, you had a contradiction between a people and an Anglophilic elite. This is manifested at every turn in the history of our country of any type of confrontation with the ruling class. Every manifestation of populism has always been an uprising against an establishment aligned with the British Empire. So America is a history of struggle. America was never realized. It was always something struggling to be born. America has always been struggling to be born. I want you guys to keep that in your head and recite it to yourself. America is a country that has always been struggling to be born. It wasn't born yet with 1776. That is one of the chapters in the long history of a country that has been struggling to be. Okay? So keep that in mind. It's not just 1776. This is the long road of the history of a civilization and a country which is not solely European. It's mixed with the local American indigenous civilization as well, and others. And it's been struggling to be born. Popular Front picked Jefferson over Hamilton. I don't think you have to choose between them. Okay, I sympathize with the LaRouche people a lot. Obviously, you guys know that. I'm inspired by them a lot. But one thing I don't agree with them about is, and I'm humble. I'm humbling myself because I could be wrong. But I never took the view that it's like one is evil and one is good. Like, for example, Plato and Aristotle. Like, to me, Plato is the philosopher, but I don't see Aristotle as inherently evil. I just think he looks at it from a different angle. So it's the same thing with Jefferson and Hamilton, I would reckon. You don't have to always... you have to have a dialectic view. That's my view. But I do understand when it comes to... What I do agree with them about... So when it comes to the philosophy stuff and that political stuff, I have a little disagreements with them. But when it comes to their insights about concrete history and the connections they're able to draw, they're mostly right. Like, yeah, the British Empire is evil and America can or does represent something good in comparison. So I agree with that dualism. But that's a real geopolitical, whatever, practical analysis. It's not just like based on philosophy. Okay? Now, continuing. When you accuse when you talk about Americanism, what are you fucking talking about? You're not talking about anything. There's no America yet, so to speak. It's never become its own independent thing. Now, finally, how the fuck does America represent something good? Because America represents a new blank slate, a new beginning. That's as simple as that. According to the LaRouche people, the American system is based on the use of credit as a subordination to industry. It's the reign of industry, not finance. The real economy, not the fictional one. It represented an end for here we go. Shut the fuck up. I'm so sick of stupid. This is exactly what I'm fucking talking about. It represented an end for the natives. This is the noble, savage British mythology. This is what I'm actually going to get to as well. Okay. First of all, no, it did not. All of that started with the British colonialism, specifically the British colonialism. But in general, European colonialism was not good for indigenous Americans. Everyone knows that. No one's denying it. But the idea that America represented a unique evil is a fucking lie. Yes. Chris Morlock, for some reason, you actually get it. It was Anglo-Universalism reified and thrown onto the American people. It was a reified, that's the exact word. It was a reified form of Anglo-Universalism. It was not it didn't come from the American country itself. Didn't Jefferson want to kill the natives? Okay, this history is extremely complicated, and it's not going to be given justice through these black and white moralistic fucking narratives you guys are trying to draw, because it's way more complicated. First of all, you have to analyze and understand what are the norms at the time internationally for things like this. What is actually representing the norm? Right? Was this a uniquely nefarious, satanic kind of attitude that they held? I mean, second of all, what was the context? Third of all, even if it was a unique nefarious, which I'm open to the possibility of, but if it was a uniquely nefarious evil, then dialectically speaking, it also represents its opposite, a uniquely emancipatory whatever potential, or as the Jacobin people like to say. I hate saying it that way. I think this is the issue, is that when people attempt, Pesto, I get it. You don't know what we're talking about. I get. Listen, when you try to reduce something to crimes alone, you will never have a correct materialist historical analysis. When you try to reduce the American project to its crimes and barbarism and things like that, like, for example, when you try to reduce the significance of a president like Andrew Jackson to the crime against humanity that was the Trail of Tears, you're not actually having a real historical analysis of what happened. You're just getting caught up in your moralistic outrage and blinding yourself to any materialist analysis. But you reduce the American project because I was fucking simplifying a dualism, you fucking idiot. Because it has practical significance. Like, yes, essentially speaking, America is. Because essentially speaking, America is a blank slate. Racism, genocide, came from Britain. It didn't come from America. It's not essentially American. Universalism is Anglo. It's not. Anglo-universalism is Anglo. Anglo-universalism is Anglo. And yes, it's an Anglo-universalism. There's also a Mongol universalism. It's not inherently Anglo in and of itself. Okay. But the point I'm trying to hit home is, let's just cut all this stupid bullshit and make it more simple, right? Let's just make this a lot more simple because it doesn't need to be so fucking complicated, does it? No, it doesn't. Let's make it more simple. You're going to see this theme when it comes to racism too. We have to really... This is like where critical race theory is going to come in. So we're going to have some critical race theory now, guys. Here's the truth. And I'm going to put on my New York Times glasses. And just pretend these are not sunglasses, but these are glasses. You're going to see them from the side. And I'm a New York Times editor. Here's the scandalous, rotten truth. I hate to poke a hole in your little heroic, mythical narrative, but I'm all about breaking myths. And this is HBO, and you're going to have the real thing now. So steamy and scandalous. So steamy and scandalous. This is the real Vice news. The real Vice of the world behind the bullshit. Oh, yeah. Your little mythological narrative? Sorry to ruin your fun, Republicans. Sorry to ruin your fun, Christians, but science disagrees. Sorry, Republicans, but the facts don't align with what you think in your heart. And here's the rotten truth. Here's the real rotten truth. Whatever narrative you're trying to create about the American people and the working class, the truth is, they were themselves racist. The truth is that people were racist. People were racist, and they did racist things. And a lot of the racist violence, it came from below. It didn't come from above, it came from below. The white settlers, the white working class, is a myth. Jay Sakai told me. And this is the New York Times, and this is the 1619 Project, and we have to critically reflect on why we are so racist. Because we can't just blame the elites, and we can't just blame the capitalists. It's within ourselves, and we need to look in the mirror and have a hard reflection about who we are and feel bad about it. And that's the goal, is we need to feel guilty about it. So Haz, when you are talking about how the push for war is against the interests of the American people, you're lying. It is in our interests to want war, but we need to go against our interests because it's the right thing to do. And I'm the editor of the New York Times. And yes, we do benefit from imperialism. But I don't want to benefit anymore because I want to do the right thing. And we need to do it right. We need to take a long, hard look in the mirror and do the right thing. We are racist as a country. I am a critical race theorist, and we need to rethink everything. Because you're racist, I'm racist, and we're all racist. And there's something wrong with us, and we need to look in the mirror. Because all of these settlers who are on strike, all of these working class settlers need to have a long, hard look in the mirror and realize that they're wrong and they're racist. And it comes from you. You benefited. You're a racist. Normal citizens did it, not the British. You all benefited from it. You genocided the natives. You did this. You are the bad guy, and it was you. And we need to point that out because we need to feel guilty about it. How familiar does that sound to you guys when it comes to the default stance of American communists right now, who have abandoned materialism in favor of moralism? American leftists, the rulers of the Communist Party. Isn't that their stance? Well, let me tell you the disgusting, dirty lie behind this filthy, disgusting, ugly fucking lie that they're spreading and they're trying to force on us. And I'm going to expose it full front and center. When the people engage in evil, in everyday, banal evil, as Hannah Arendt said, she said the banality of evil, everyday, habitual evil. Yes, the poor and the people from below did engage in acts of evil and racism and genocide, potentially, and theft and whatever you want. Sure. No one's going to deny that. But you cannot hold them individually responsible for that. What's that, Haas? You're saying you can't hold people responsible for the evil they commit? Not insofar as you're treating that evil as a social phenomenon, no. If they uniquely were responsible for that evil, let's say, for example, there was a racist bully in the 30s. Insofar as it is a widespread social phenomena, you really can't hold the bully on the playground responsible, right? If this is normalized behavior, you have to look at where the source is coming from. You can't blame the individual. You have to look at the source. Because the goddamn truth about us as human beings, and this is in our nature as human beings, is that we are living, breathing creatures of habit. When corruption rules us, when evil rules us, we naturally adjust. And the only way you fight evil is not by raising this existential, stupid question of why is it that we do everyday acts of evil? You target the evil at its source. And this is where I do agree with the LaRouche people in the sense, yes, I'm a universalist Platonist, strictly in the sense of our universal humanity, of what is good, what is right, what is wrong, what is evil. That is something that is made real and manifest in the state, in the concrete unity of the people. That is the concrete site of our morality, what is right, what is wrong, what is good, and what is evil. It is the polity at its most fundamental, the polity. If you want to confront evil, you do not confront it in its everyday banal manifestations. You confront it in its concrete universality in the form of our common polity. Otherwise, they are going to raise this false, liberal, Calvinist, completely meaningless philosophical problem of like, why is it that we don't put our principles and morality before our behavior? Because we're fucking creatures of habit. Before anything, we have to We born in this world crying. We eat, shit, drink, sleep, live. We live, we eat. We're living, breathing human beings. That's what we fucking are. When it comes to our morality, our common morality, that is something made manifest in the common form of our concrete unity. Somehow. You cannot blame people individually for being creatures of habit of a social evil, of a fundamentally social evil. You cannot blame individual human beings for being creatures of the habit of a fundamentally social evil. Write that down and write it home. Okay? So, let's use concrete examples. During the expansion of slavery, it is true that there was a popular basis for the support of slavery. But the only reason there was, in the South specifically, is because, again, you had the crisis, the recurring historical crisis of the peasant who wants their land back. You had a people facing proletarianization who were being uprooted from their land by monopolist landowner slavocrats. So what did the slavocrats dupe the people by saying? If you want to avoid the proletarianization, we're going to promise you something. We're going to expand westward, and you're going to get your own land and your own slaves, and you're going to be able to rescue yourself from poverty. Now, did people buy that shit up? Yes, they did. They did buy that up. But it's only because they were deceived, because they believed in a false promise that was based on a real need. And that need was the need for a new reparcelization and some kind of dignified human life that was beyond proletarianization. But the way the slavocrats responded to that problem and articulated that problem was through slavery. So who's really to blame? Is it the people who are to blame, or is it the slavocrats? Well, I'm a Platonist. It's the slavocrats who are to blame. Of course it is. If you want to confront that evil in any meaningful capacity, you don't confront it at the individual level. You confront it at the level of where it becomes some type of potential social truth, which is you have a common social problem. People need to avoid proletarianization. They need some kind of substantive existence, right? And the response to that is slavery. So how do you confront that? You say, no, this is a false response to this very true problem. And it's also true when it comes to racism, by the way. Racism, yeah, it was something that manifested itself at the lowest levels of the people. But what did that actually represent? Like, where was the racism? Yes, we know where it was being manifested, but where was it? It was at a more fundamental, universal site of social truth. And you could only confront it at that level. You don't confront it at the level of the sum total of individuals, and we need to reflect individually on why we're so evil inside of us. This is just Calvinist bullshit, right? You confront it at the level of the concrete universality of racism. Because again, we are living, breathing human beings, and we're creatures of habit. Babylon was inhabited by human beings. Babylon is the city of sin. God did not tell the people of Babylon to look into their hearts and ask why they're such bad people. God destroyed the Tower of Babylon because it was the Tower of Babylon that was the concrete universality of this everyday, habitual social evil. Do you understand me or no? Do you understand me or no? They're always going to try and tell us that, Hans, you're blaming the ruling class, but people were just as culpable. No, they're not. Because people are creatures of habit. We do not premise our actions based on contrived ethical or moral systems of right and wrong. And that does not make us bad people. We don't base our actions based on, like, What you're talking about is morality, but your morality is in regards to a social praxis. It's a social will you're referring to. Our individual morality will only go so as far as the mores, customs of the time. But Americans are outraged by that, right? Americans will be like, no, the truly brave thing is to defy all of society as an individual in the name of what you think is individually correct. And certainly that is admirable. There are admirable people who have done that. But you cannot hold everyone to that standard, because at the end of the day, most people are living, breathing human beings. We do not premise our existence based on directly actualizing the will of some universal truth. That is not the site of morality. That is the site of the concrete universality of statehood and what Hegel calls the ethical life, instantiated in laws, institutions that are beyond individuals. We as individuals do not embody consciously the universality of all being. I am not the state. Americans must understand this. We are not individually the state. We do not act on behalf of the whole universalism of all society and the state. For example, when people think about some of the responses to communism, oh, if you're a communist, why do you have an iPhone? Oh, if you're a communist, why do you live this certain lifestyle? Well, it's because as Americans, we have a tendency to think of individuals as embodying the whole universality of the state. We don't recognize there's this social reality that's just more fundamental than individuals or the sum total of individuals. Whatever you can't reproduce at the level of an individual, you don't recognize exists. And that does come from theology. It comes from theology because, and I'll explain it to you, with the Protestant Reformation, you had a breakdown in trust for the Catholic Church, the universal institution of Christianity. So Protestantism was this more individualistic thing, or specifically in the form of Calvinism or whatever, where individuals started to understand the truth of revelation and the truth of the religion and whatever in an individual way. You have to verify it individually. You can't just habitually be a creature of habit and conform to the institution of the state. Of the Catholic Church. Moose Electric, I know you're trying to be sarcastic right now. I am literally 48 hours sleep deprived. And you're bluffing. You're bluffing. I don't care if your mind is being blown. If you have any meaningful rebuttal or any pushback on anything I'm fucking saying, you can go ahead and get in my fucking VC and do that. Or you're gonna get fucking banned because I'm sick of seeing your stupid fucking name in my chat. Why don't you get in VC if you have a problem with anything I'm fucking saying? Or maybe you're just going to dismiss it all as meaningless. If you're going to dismiss it all as meaningless, then you're alone here, because many people do find meaning in it, and many people are articulating insights from it. So if you find it meaningless, you're just cutting off any good faith. Yes, individuals are absolved of the responsibility of the guilt of social evils. They are. Now, if you're an ideologist and you know better, maybe you're not. Maybe you're not. I can grant that possibility. Maybe you do. You should know better, right? If you know. John Brown and the abolitionists knew better. They knew slavery was a grave evil. John Brown could not own slaves, right? Well, the Founding Fathers were different, though. I mean, many of the Founding Fathers did view slavery as an evil, and yet they kept slaves. But the reason is because when they were slave owners, they were viewing themselves as creatures of habit. These are the everyday private habits of people, and this is what's considered normal at the time. They weren't making any extraordinary statement. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes of when people critique the Founding Fathers for being slave owners is they just assume that the Founding Fathers were, by owning slaves, making some kind of new statement about slavery when they weren't. Slavery as an institution had existed for hundreds of years by then. I'm not trying to whitewash it or normalize it. It was the most fundamentally barbaric institution, and one of the most in the history of the whole world. Even compared to ancient times, I mean. But they did view it as a social evil. They did view it as an evil, though. They didn't apply that to their private life because they were not yet able to make actual the truth of it as being an evil in the form of the state, right? So let's say, for example, they said this is an evil and we are going to extinguish this evil. By freeing the slaves that they owned, that's a more kind of individual charitable act. But really actually acting upon it would have been like making the laws make it illegal, which some wanted to do. They couldn't because it would have meant war with the South at the time, which they weren't capable of. People don't understand this. They don't understand this. They don't have the nuance to fucking understand this. Jefferson was abnormally evil even for slave owners. I mean, but is that a defect on his personal character, which I would not deny? Or is that a defect on his broader fundamental social vision? Because Americans tend to be cynical about how those things can be completely unrelated. Americans think if someone is bad personally, they must be bad when it comes to what do you mean a broad social vision? That's a bunch of bullshit. Everyone is reducible to their scandalous private life. That's not true. Our private life is a footnote to our social life. Yeah, Washington freed his slaves in his will. Yeah, I know about that. Many abolitionists were racist. Yes, they were. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah, many were racist. Many were personally racist. Marx was personally racist. Marx didn't want his daughter to marry a French guy. He said, I don't want her marrying that French guy. That's disgusting. That's what he said. His words. I'm not saying that, but he said that. Okay? But did he believe that as like a social thing? Did he be like, we should make it a social principle? No, he didn't. As a social principle, Marx believed in the humanity of all people, and so on and so on. But his private life was dealing with a different reality, right? And also, I know you guys read the letters between Marx and Engels, and they were definitely not politically correct, to say the least, and the way they talked about people. And it often was racially charged. But guess what? Can you hold Marx responsible for being a creature of habit, of a social evil at his time? No, you can't. You really can't. Now, you could be more enlightened as a human being, and that's fine, but you're not actually accomplishing anything. That's why vegans are completely the most evil people in the world. Vegans think they're accomplishing some kind of virtue when they're just feeling good about themselves. The same thing is true for the recycling movement and all this stupid bullshit. It's the same fucking thing, right? I want to be a good person. If you want to be a good person, you have to abide by the standards that exist during your time. You can't punch above your weight and create an alternative society. A new world begins with you. What's that stupid saying? Gandhi said that if you want to achieve change, start by looking in the mirror. Change begins with you. Well, Gandhi was fucking wrong. And I don't know if I'm allowed to call him an idiot. I don't know if I'm allowed to call that guy an idiot, but I would if I was able to. And he was wrong. And didn't the Beatles say the same thing? You say you want a revolution. Why don't you be the change you want to see in the world first? Shut the fuck up, you stupid-ass Beatles. Go back to Britain. Corrupted our culture. Be the change you want to see in the world. Yeah, it's completely stupid and false. That's a completely stupid and false view. You cannot be the change you want to see in the world, because the change you want to see in the world is antecedent to your being. It's more fundamental than your being. Your being forms around it. Your being is subordinate to it. It comes after. Habit is what matters, not consciously dictated or decided behavior on the basis of some kind of universal ethical maxim. Habit is what matters. Your intuitive, instinctual habits. What are the mores, customs, tastes of your society? That's the stuff of civilization. Civilization is not, in contrast to what racists think, and racists do think this, they think civilization is when you consciously decide to believe in some kind of ethical system in your head as an individual, and you live your life accordingly. And for them, that's civilization. No, that's not civilization. The Nazis said this was civilization because they looked at Russians and other peoples, and they just saw how spontaneous they were. They're dancing, and they're spontaneous human beings, living, breathing human beings. They're acting in ways that don't abide to some kind of like very, like, you know, formalistic, waspy kind of like tight behavior. I mean, don't American racists say the same thing about Latinos and other people? Like, wasps are very much more like in a box a little bit, right? They have trouble dancing and stuff. And because there's a culture of regulating behavior according to consciously contrived universal maxims, and room for human spontaneity and authentic human intuitive expression and feeling is eliminated. But in contrast to what racists will say, civilization is not when a people act according to the neurotic need to conform your behavior as though it is premised by your thoughts. Civilization is when there is a harmony between the institutions, the social institutions of society, and the everyday spontaneous habits of the people. That's why, in contrast to what the racists say, for example, in America, minorities have always been far more civilized. Why? Because in culturally diverse, to use the politically correct language, communities, behavior is not strictly based on, it's like people are spontaneously can be good, spontaneously have a sense of right and wrong and good and bad. You should not do this, you should do this. And you don't debate about it or negotiate about it. It just is. It comes like it's naturally, right? That's real civilization, because it's not natural in the sense of like coming from our biology. It's coming from a unique synthesis between our humanity and our social being. Whereas the ruling class, and I say the ruling class because the majority of white people are human, you know, civilized, spontaneous people. I'm not trying to take a dig at white people, by the way. Don't think that's what I'm doing. But the ruling class, across the board, regardless of race, by the way, I'm just bringing race up because I'm responding to racists and what racists will say, right? But the ruling class tries to premise all expressions of humanity in terms of preconceived forms and etiquette and like behavior. Now, even Japan and China, cultures that you think of these cultures, you think of very strict formal cultures, very pure formality, especially for Japan, which is true. But that's only because their sense of pure form is in harmony with a deeper sense of the antecedents of living being. First is the river. What is it in Taoism? To watch the river flow, right? First the river is flowing, and then you acquire a pure form out of that stuff. You don't begin with pure form and try to premise the world on the basis of pure form. So people misunderstand the Asian cultures in this way. At the very least, I want you guys to confirm for me. You've heard of the thing where people will say, People are evil. You have to realize it's not the ruling class. Jay Sakai, it's the white settlers. You're familiar with that, aren't you? When they say shit like that, that impulse to be like, oh, you're trying to create this grand mythological narrative where you can just blame someone else. But the truth is, we have to look at ourselves to find the problem, because we're the problem. We're the evil ones. After all, we're the ones reproducing capitalism with our consumption. We're the bad ones, not the capitalists. Can you see why that's a problem? After I explained you can see why it's a problem now, right? You can see why it's wrong. Why is it wrong then? We're gonna have some Professor Haas test speedrunning. Why is it wrong? Go ahead, run it back. I'm gonna quiz you. Why is it wrong? Someone get in VC and explain why it's wrong, and I'll give you a quiz. I'll grade you from F to A. Why is it wrong? Why is this guilt tripping shit wrong? Why is it's not only that it's bad politically and all this stuff. Why is it wrong? Why is it fundamentally false? Why is it wrong? What makes it false and wrong? Sylvia, yes, Sia got it correct. I'm glad you picked up on it. It's one of the only people that gets it correct. Because we are creatures of social habit by default. You can't fault us for being living, breathing human beings who are creatures of habit. Yes, because society, and remember, not just society, specifically the polity, the universal, concrete realization of society. Because after all, what is society? Who is society? Where is society? It's not society, it's the concrete universality that realizes our common society and our common sociality. It's not just, I'm not using some vague word, social reality. I'm talking about where is our social reality real, a real, universal, concrete thing. And it's there in the form of our polity. And that's why I said I'm a Platonist. Because for Plato, that's the republic. For Plato, that's the republic. It's not the structure of society. Forget all that dumb bullshit you heard from, it's the structure, man. No, forget that. That actually made zero sense. I pity the fucking idiots of the world. I just pity them. I just pity the fucking stupid. I don't know what to tell them. They're so arrogant about how fucking stupid they are, and they're so adamant about it. And then when I confront them and yell at them about it, they become mouse saying, okay, Hans, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, you should be sorry. Because if you thought about it yourself, you wouldn't say something so fucking stupid. Plato's Republic is literally about that. For Plato's Republic, the Republic is an apparatus of our individuality. For Plato, we're not just the sum total of individuals. The truth of our individuality is manifested in the form of the universal republic. The universal and ideal republic. That's what his fucking book was about. The republic is literally an organ of the mind. It realizes something within all of us that is at the same time more fundamental than us. That's why it's Platonist. Because for Plato, the universal comes before the particular. You don't begin with an individual. You begin with the truth of the individual, which is for Plato, the republic. But because you're a product of our George Soros-funded education system, and your dumbass goes on fucking Reddit, and you go on your fucking computer and you watch that fucking guy, I can't even insult him because it's considered harassment, Vsauce, and you go on your fucking YouTube and you update your stupid bullshit, you don't know the goddamn first fucking thing about Plato. You just assume the opposite is true by default. Plato? How could that be? How could the universal be first? How could the universal be more fundamental than the particular? I did our philosophy, and it turns out all philosophy just reproduces me being a little shy, awkward nerd. Yeah. Everything is part of, we're all living in Vsauce's world, guys. It's all Vsauce. It's all Vsauce's universe. You know, everything is just the wonders. I mean, philosophy, listen, at the end of the day,
things are complex. At the end of the day, everything's meaningless. There's no meaning in the world. Everything's meaningless. It's all meaningless. It's all meaningless. There's no meaning. At the end of the day, we're going back to r/r philosophy, okay? Because at the end of the day, we're not actually getting anywhere. We're not solving anything. We're not going anywhere. It all goes back to r/Reddit philosophy. And we're just, listen, Reddit is Reddit. Technology is technology. And I watch Vice News, HBO. Look, the only thing that matters is the scandalous, steamy truth of things, okay? Don't talk to me about your grand visions and your grand ideas, when in reality, it's all going to go back to this simple, scandalous, and steamy truth of things behind the surface. I don't want to burst your bubble in your meta-narrative, but the truth is that this country was racist, and the Founding Fathers were racist, and the Republic was racist, and we need to tear the statues down, and I hate to burst your bubble. So you think you want to form a meta-narrative, huh? You want to form a meta-narrative where there's a hero and there's a villain in the story? No. Everything's more complex. No.
That's your fucking life, right? That's your fucking life. That's your whole world. That's everything you think in this world. You are corrupt. You are a corrupt blight on humanity when you think this way. There are heroes. There are villains. There is a meta-narrative. There is a mythos. There is a story. And it's the greatest story ever told. It's a story they've been telling for thousands and thousands of years in different ways. It's the same fucking story. And it is real. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's no eternal return. It's not just all the same thing. There is change. There is a story. And that is the most dangerous thing you could say in our society. That is the most dangerous thing you could say in our society is that, you know what? We don't understand the Roman Empire. It was different. The Roman Republic was different. You didn't have Reddit in there. They'd be like, well, so you know Reddit, right? Well, back in the Roman Republic, they had their own, this is what you're going to hear on YouTube Historian. Well, they had their own version of Reddit. And basically, like, the Redditors of the Roman times were updating in the common forum, and it was pretty much Reddit. No, it fucking wasn't, right? Because when you have this arrogant view of trying to find all the aspects of our society in ancient societies, you make a few mistakes. One, you assume that these features you're elevating to eternity that exist in our society are always going to exist. How do you know Reddit's not on the precipice of its destruction? What if we're not going to have Reddit anymore? Inshallah, we're not going to have it anymore. Second, you assume there has been a progress where we know better than the past. How do you know better than the past? What if there are things the Romans understood about being we forgot? What if the future realizes itself in the form of remembering things that were lost in the past? Why was it called the Italian Renaissance? What was the Renaissance? It was because they were rediscovering something that was forgotten. Something that was forgotten. The mere passage of time does not mean you have mastered the past. Third of all, it assumes that you as an individual, forget about if our society has become more advanced, it assumes that you as an individual have mastered our society. What if there are things the Romans can tell us about our society today that you as an individual are too stupid or too unknowledgeable to understand? So you see, it's 3 mistakes you make when you say this stupid shit. It's like 3 mistakes you make when you assume this.